All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much, not only for joining us for this morning, but for all you've done for the society for so many years.
Thank you, Tom.
When you look back at your presidency, what was the most memorable experience?
Well, I think very early in my presidency, I was asked to review the contract that we had for ERM Services, which was managing the ASDS. We were not completely an independent organization. We were a sort of a satellite of the AAD, and ERM Services belonged to the AAD and was managing us. And I had a strong business background by that point, so I actually read the contract for a change. And I started looking at what they were charging us, and I said, wait a minute, this is crazy. And then I realized that our executive director, Kathy Swedman, who is superb, and I hired her, so I was very close to her, that she was an employee not of the ASDS, but of the AAD, and that she was spending a lot of her time doing AAD things. So I called the administrator of the AAD, and I said, you know, this contract's unacceptable, so I'm going to rewrite it and send it back to you, which I did. And then he told me, well, it's not done that way. So I then gave it to Kathy to give to our attorney, who massaged it with legalese, and then we gave it back to the AAD, and they refused to sign the contract. They said, you either do it our way or the highway. And by that point, Kathy and I had already game planned the idea of an extraction, and I had board approval man by man to make sure that the board was on that side. And when the time came, we told the AAD we were going to exit, and of course they told us we would soon perish. But then what happened was, when we left, they folded ERM Services completely. And gave up managing other organizations, which at the time they were managing 13. So that was quite a crisis. And but Kathy did a remarkable job of restructuring and back-upping all the computer stuff and securing the funds, which the AAD immediately tried to get and couldn't. So it was, she did a yeoman's job, and we did, as you know, survive and thrive. And if you look at today's ASDS, I look at it with great pride and say, wow, what a different place.
Yeah, what a time of transition, you know, you went through, or you guided us through.
It was, I'll just say it was the most interesting of times.
I'm sure. Well, perish we did not, and flourish we did.
Yes.
And I didn't realize you were the one responsible for bringing Kathy Durdoff on board.
That was my first job.
Yeah, what a great move.
Yeah, so and thank God she has stayed with us, because she's been an inspiration.
What are the issues we're facing the society at that time?
Well, that was the survival issue. You know, the biggest issue in those days was fighting with plastic surgery. The plastic people all around the country were trying hard to find ways to keep us out of their space, which they didn't realize actually was our space, and they were intruders. But, you know, that was a matter of perception. And I think the other thing that was a problem at that time, which we did sort of solve, was anesthesia kept blaming us for anesthesia deaths with tumescent liposuction. And they were actually publishing articles and saying, well, the patient really didn't die from anesthesia, they died from lidocaine. And the fact is, there was no data to support that. And Brett Coldiron was a yeoman in researching out the data and finding out that, in fact, in outpatient liposuction with tumescent, there were no deaths, only when the patient had general anesthesia. So one of the challenges I had was to call the president of the Anesthesia Society, and explain to him that we did not want to go to war with them, but if they continued to try to publish spurious articles, we were going to have to fight back, and we didn't want to do that. And he was a reasonable fellow and recognized the sanity in that. So,
and with data comes power.
What you said today in your talk, absolutely. Data provides all that.
Yeah. What other innovations were happening at that time? You've already gone through some of them.
Well, I was president 2001 to 2002, and that was when we had the beginning of the first HAs being available. You know, they were approved. Botox got approved around that time, although it had been used off-label for years. So we had all of a sudden a whole new era of toxin and fillers that were legally and readily available. So we were within the line, so to speak. And of course, there's been a constant advancement in the laser, radio frequency. All of those things sort of burgeoned around 2000, 2001, and of course have flown since. So yeah, it was quite an exciting era.
Yeah, an explosion of technology and
Unbelievable
procedures at that point, which is exciting and continues today.
Yeah.
When you think about all the patients you've seen over the years, do you have any patients that particularly stick out in your mind?
Well, all of us, I think, have had stars and kind of people that other people would be, wow, you really, but of course you don't talk about that. I actually have one patient that was probably the most gratifying, was a fellow actually from your area, from New England, who was on his way, he had just retired and was on his way to the Bahamas in his boat with his wife to begin his life of sailing the world. And he stops in my office in Miami and says, I got this little bump on my head and it just showed up, and before I go off into the Netherlands, I think I'd like to have somebody look at it. So it was a very nondescript lesion, and I thought, I can't really tell what it is, but I said, I'll biopsy it for you. He said, well, will that fix it? And I said, well, if you want, I'll excise it, because that way it's probably done with. So I excise it, and then he says, okay, I'm off to the Bahamas, I'll get the stitches taken out there. And the only way I could get a hold of him was email. A week later, I get that it's metastatic melanoma. And here he's in Bahamas, and it turned out in the end of the day that I had just attended the first conference on PD-1 inhibitors in the treatment of advanced melanoma. And I found the only guy in Miami who had access to that, because it was really hot stuff at the time. And I finally got a hold of him and referred him there, and it is now 4 years later, he is cancer-free.
Wow, that's
So
great.
that was, and he visits me every year when he's passing by to take me to dinner to thank me, and that's it's about as gratifying as it gets.
It is. Wow. Well, looking back at your career, you've done a lot of different, very interesting things in and out of dermatology. Is there anything you'd change or do differently?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't think so. I was an OBGYN before I was a derm. That was a good decision, getting out of that and getting into this. I think I got into derm at a time when derm probably went through some of the most exciting movement in that specialty, and I think I reiterate what Bill said, the measure of a man is his adaptability to change. The change in derm has been staggering in my 45 years of being involved, and I'm just so happy to have been a part of that.
That's great. Well, we're happy you were a part of that too. What advice would you give to today's young dermatologic surgeons?
It's really simple. I had a great friend. As you know, I'm a wine lover, and one of my great friends was Robert Mondavi. I knew him, he died recently, but I knew him for 40-some years. And at 90, he was off starting a new venture in South America and stopped by to stay with me for a couple of days on his way. And I said, what are you working so hard at 90 years of age? He said, Steve, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. He said, I don't think I've ever worked. And that's what I would say. If you're doing what you love, if you don't love what you're doing, find something in dermatology you love. We got a vast specialty. We have a specialty with so many different little venues that if you don't like most, go into derm path, go into cosmetics, go into derm oncology. There's so many places that you can find a place to hang your hat that you love. That's what you do.
Agreed. And what are your predictions for the future of our specialty?
I think we're in one of the better specialties looking forward. I think the changes in medicine are going to be inescapable for everyone. Cost controls and managed care and all of this are looming over the horizon big. But I think, again, if you're doing what you love doing, if you're enjoying it, it's going to never disappoint you.
I agree. And what advice do you have for the ASDS leadership serving today?
Don't let the society get fragmented. That's, I think, the problem the AAD has, is that you sat on the board with me at the AAD, They have so many special interests, all of whom are desperately defending their turf, that as an organization they can't make a collective, constructive for dermatology decision. ASDS has been very nimble in representing all derm surgeons and trying to be as inclusive as possible. And I think our meeting represents that. So I would say to the leadership, try to keep that is so important, that we are unified and on the same page with each other and support each other. And that way we'll stay together.
I agree. Well, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Tom.
That's awesome.